what's going on in the world today, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Southern Sense Talk Radio with your host, Annie, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, and featuring Curtis C.S. Bennett and the most interesting guests that you'll find anywhere on internet radio. So sit back, relax, and remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
And welcome back to another adventure here on Southern Sense. You're watching live on southernsense.net, our homepage, as well as on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, half a dozen other places. So sit back and relax. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, Annie, along with my co-host, Curtis C.S. Bennett. Curtis, you ready for a rocking show today?
I'm ready for everything, including Monday when we get to turn the ship around. Change course, get it back on course.
Yeah, Monday is Inauguration Day, and we got a lot to talk about on that. But let people know what's going on with the show. Today we have ourselves two great guests, James Steele. We were supposed to have Gregory Wrightstone, but he stood me up again, but sent his buddy James Steele from the CO2 Coalition. We're going to be talking about the wildfires in California with him, as well as John O'Connor. We've had John on a couple of the times. He's the attorney and legal analyst. He was the one that represented Deep Throat in the Watergate, and he wrote the book Postgate, dealing with Watergate. So he'll be joining us also. But what we're going to be talking about also today is, today, President Biden declared there's a 28th Amendment. Well, that's news to the rest of the country because it was not ratified by the congressional deadline. It was not recognized, is not recognized by the archivist, and he unconstitutionally declared a new amendment to the Constitution. We're going to be talking to him about that. Trump has been listening to his security advisors and has moved the inauguration from outside of the Capitol and with the audience in the mall there. I mean, it is huge, the amount of people that they can fit in there, to inside, because of security concerns, as well as the weather. They already have snow on the ground in Washington, D.C. And how many slip and fall accidents are we going to see with people trying to crowd the mall? And they're expecting more bad weather coming up through the weekend and on Monday. So they did the wise thing. They're moving the actual ceremony into the Capitol, and they'll have it there, and they'll broadcast it so everyone can watch and see it. And then the celebration and everything, they're going to move into the Capital One Arena, which is, I think, a very smart move. I mean, there have been hints of terrorist threats, possible attacks. We've got bad weather. So let's play it safe. And he did the right thing and moving it indoors where there's more and better security for it. Want to thank people that are joining us in the chat room, recognize them, say hello to them. A lot of other stuff going on, too, that we're going to be talking about. Let me just go through my notes here. We were talking about the Biden amendment suddenly. Pam Bondi's hearing, and yesterday was Kristi Noem. And oh boy, did these Democrats, these liberal Democrats, show their true colors. And the Supreme Court has also backed the law requiring TikTok to be either sold or blocked from the U.S. But so many things to talk about, so much to do. So I want people to sit back and relax, Curtis. And before we go to do our dedication, you want to throw a couple of words in before I tell you to stop talking?
Well, I'm waiting for Biden to rename the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of Biden. And the Panama Canal, the Biden Mall Canal. That'll be his legacy.
Oh, man. There's so much to talk about. And I mean, they just keep on giving us fodder for these shows. I mean, we're no sooner done with one episode. By the time we hang up our headsets, a whole slew of other crap is hit.
There'll be something else out there.
It'll always something else. But anyway, for those that watch our show and listen to our show, I want to let you also know that we've included now Blog Talk Radio will no longer be in existence. So we will not be broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio come the end of this month. They're closing everything down. But we have moved over to Buzzsprout. And Buzzsprout has allowed us also to take those broadcasts and automatically send the RSS feeds over to numerous places, such as iHeartRadio, iTunes, Apple, and so forth. So we've actually expanded our market by going to Buzzsprout, but you can actually go directly to Buzzsprout itself, like we did to Blog Talk, and catch the podcast. It won't be live. It will be the podcast that you can check in the archives. So for live, you can come here, and you can always catch the previous shows over on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn and on X in our feeds. But you can also catch it, the audio, which you can probably play on your smart device as you're driving around and listen to us. Anyway, that said, we start each show with a dedication to a fallen hero. And in that tradition, today's show is going out to Deputy Sheriff William Butler, Jr. of the Hillsdale County Sheriff's Office in Michigan. His end of watch was Thursday, January 27th of 2024.
Hillsdale County Sheriff's Deputy William Henry Butler, Jr., the man shot and killed yesterday during a traffic stop. He was 51 years old, leaves behind a wife and 5 children. We're continuing our team coverage tonight of this tragic shooting of a fallen hero. Our I-team looking into the gunman, Michael Fiddler's past. Officers are trying to arrest him because he had a warrant out for his arrest. Sean Haggerty standing by with more details in just a moment. But first, Sophie Bates spending the day across the state line talking with the community as they mourn the loss of this fallen officer. Sophie.
Yeah, Leah, this was Deputy Butler's patrol vehicle, and this is what he was driving yesterday when he pulled up to that traffic stop. Now it's become a memorial.
He was really a good man, and this is really hard for everybody.
A community united in grief.
You know, I knew coming into this job that we would have officer-involved shootings. However, I didn't think it would be my deputy being the one shot.
Sheriff Scott Hodshire says he knew Deputy William Butler for 25 years.
Deputy Butler would be sadly missed. 2 years on the force as far as road patrol. Just graduated accident investigation school. I was looking forward to investigating crashes. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen.
Butler was shot yesterday during a traffic stop.
Shots fired. Shots fired. We got a subject. We have an officer down.
Both the men in the car had warrants. When Butler tried to arrest this man, Eric Michael Fiddler, Fiddler pulled out a gun and shot Butler.
2 simple warrants, and he ends up taking the life of one of my deputies who has 5 children and a wife.
Fiddler was ultimately shot and killed by Michigan State Police, and Butler was pronounced dead at the hospital. It's the first time an officer from the department has been killed in nearly 100 years.
My heart goes out to the family and the friends that are really close to him and his children. This is going to have a lasting impact on everybody for a very long time.
I've been here at the sheriff's office since about noon today, and community members have just been pouring in, bringing flowers and food for the mourning officers. The sheriff tells me there will be a memorial sometime next week, but they're not sure exactly when yet. We'll keep you posted. Lee?
All right, Sophie, thank you. And the 13 Action News I-team is looking deeper into the gunman's past tonight. 34-year-old Eric Michael Fiddler. He had a pretty long court record, including another physical altercation with police. I-team reporter Sean Haggerty's live tonight with what he's found. Sean.
Yeah, Lee, in looking at those court records, we found that the warrant that Fiddler was wanted on, it was a misdemeanor, and it has turned into all of this.
Passenger will not give names.
Started questioning the passenger. The passenger wasn't giving up any information on himself.
When deputies pulled over the vehicle with Eric Fiddler inside, they tried to figure out who they were dealing with.
Detective Sergeant eventually figured out who this kid was, knew that he had warrants for his arrest.
780, can you check in-house for an Eric Fiddler? I believe this could be FI.
Hillsdale County court records show Fiddler was facing a larceny charge from last September. The Jonesville man never appeared in court for an arraignment and had a warrant out for his arrest. Court records show it was a misdemeanor, with the amount alleged to have been taken as $200 or more, but less than $1,000. A check of Hillsdale County District Court records show more than 20 cases for Fiddler, many of them traffic. We did find this 2018 case. That's a felony police officer assault case. According to court records, a detective was in plain clothes and off duty when he encountered defendant, who he knew to have a valid warrant, identified himself and ordered him to stop running, and thereafter struggled to apprehend him. Fiddler eventually pleading guilty to a charge of attempted assault on a police officer, and he received 30 days in jail, according to court records. The 2018 charge before the incident with that deputy and an attempted assault charge was a possession of narcotics and a felony firearm charge. He pleaded guilty to the drug charge, and the gun charge was dropped. Lee.
Sean, thank you.
Let it be said, when we finish this race, we kept them free, we led with grace. Let it be seen, from sea to shining sea, beautiful America, living our legacy. Oh, father, mother, sister, brother, oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul of the nation, for the next generation. Let us be known as people of honor, humble and bold, faithful through fire. Let us hold firm to our convictions with wide open hearts, eager to listen. Oh, father, mother, sister, brother, oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul of the nation, for the next generation. Let us make room. Let us reimagine, welcoming voices with true compassion. Let's craft a world with hopes and dreams, challenges known, those still unseen. Oh, father, mother, sister, brother, oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul of the nation, for the next generation. Let us be sure, when our time has come, we gave them hope, we made them strong. Let it be said, when we finish this race, we kept them free, yeah, we led with grace. Oh, father, mother, sister, brother, oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul sister, brother. Oh, we gotta learn to love each other. Oh, for the soul of the nation, for the next generation.
All right, and we're back. You're here watching and listening to Southern Sense Live. I'm your hostess with the least mostest of Radio Chick-A-Dee, Annie, along with my co-host Curtis C.S. Bennett. Wow, Curtis, where do we start?
Well, I'll tell you what, at my last book signing and speaking engagement in a city called Sebring, Florida, people have great expectations for this upcoming administration. I mean, they're tired of the prior administration, and they're really kind of ticked off that these guys are still kicking and fighting all the way to the end, and leaving Trump a mess, quite a mess to clean up. So,
Yeah.
but they other than that, they have high expectation for the years to come, and for the United States to regain her status as a beacon of light to the world.
Yeah, a lot of people are very, very hopeful. And we've seen certain things happen already prior to Trump being sworn in. We've got less than 3 days. And the ceremony starts at 11. He's sworn in at 12 o'clock at noon on Monday. So that's less than 3 days right now. And already we're seeing various industries, various associations dropping their DEI, the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, because the wildfires in California are a perfect example of why they don't work. Because they spent more time and money worrying about DEI than worrying about protecting the people they serve. There are things that we have done in this nation to preserve forests. Remember Smokey Bear? We grew up with Smokey Bear. Only you can prevent forest fires, Smokey the Bear. The forestry industry nationwide did controlled burning of the undergrowth. People don't realize, it's so nice that these little bugs and mice and everything, they get all this nice little comfortable undergrowth. I'm sorry, folks, that is what causes the fires. When you have massive infestations of insects on this dead growth, that's what it is. It creates even more decay. And the more it decays, the more you have fresh tinder for a wildfire. That is why the American Indians taught us about husbandry of the forest. They were doing this long before we became the United States of America. And we learned from them. So why are we forgetting those lessons?
Well, I think a lot has to do with, this religion that the left have, where they worship Mother Nature, and human beings have subjugated to that religion.
I don't think it's not the religion of Mother Nature. It's a multi-billion or trillion-dollar business out there. This climate change, alarmist. It makes a multi-trillion-dollar business.
But I'm saying there's people who really believe in this. I mean, it's almost like a religion to them. Of course, you got people like Al Gore and a couple of others making a lot of money off of this. But I think that's part of the problem, We got
pardon me if I keep on disappearing off the screen. I've got a second computer over here and it froze up. Wow. So I keep an eye on X and everything over there. So it froze up in me. Now it just unfroze. But here, look, this is how crazy it is. And this is why I'm saying it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. And this was in redrightdaily.com. And it was titled, County Undergoes Intense Litigation with Energy Company. Now, the Delmarva area, it's a battle between the Delmarva locals, which encompasses Maryland and Delaware, and a company called U.S. Wind. And basically they're saying it's a David and Goliath battle. Now, these counties, they don't want this massive wind farm. And I think it's like 114 wind turbines they want to put off the coast near Ocean City, Maryland. And Maryland and Delaware have been fighting them, saying, no, we're not going to allow you to purchase the property to put the generators over. We're not going to allow you to put the wind farms off of our coastline. We don't want them here. And this company says, well, we're bigger and we have more money than you, and we're going to fight you tooth and nail. So this is a major litigation going on right now between these two counties and U.S. Wind. Locals, they want the pristine beauty of the coastline, and they have a very vital fishing industry. And we have been seeing, and I have been saying this for more than a decade, that there have been reports that wherever you put these wind farms, it affects the migratory paths of birds and the creatures of the sea, especially dolphins and whales, because they require a type of sonar in order to communicate. And the vibrations from these wind turbines interferes with that. So when they start putting up these wind turbines off the coast of Africa and saying we've got green energy off the coast of Africa with these wind turbines, guess what was happening? Whales and seals and dolphins and everything were floating up off the coast. They were beaching themselves. So now they're getting the farms over here, and we're having the same thing here. But no. That's an alarmist. You're one of the crazy right-wing people that they tell us. Trump was saying, yeah, the whales are being beached. We know that. The statistics show that you may have had 1 or 2 beach over a 10-year period, but when you have 12 of them beached within a 3-month period, we got a problem. And the people in Maryland and Delaware are saying, no, we don't want it. So this is interesting. The country is waking up. Wokeism is going to be put to bed.
It is, and it's you lived in New York. It kind of reminds me of a mafia movie where everyone comes to the Godfather and kisses ring. Well, Mar-a-Lago's kind of like that place right now, where even Trump's enemies.
Donald Trump, Don. He's Don.
Don, the Don. He is the Don. But you got even prior adversaries of his coming there to kiss the ring.
Well, you got Zuckerberg. You remember the Zuck Bucks down in Florida? I mean, we'll help you if you're a criminal, if you're a convict, a felon. We'll help you expunge your record with the state of Florida, pay whatever restitution you need to pay to have that expunged. You're no longer a convicted felon, and you can go out and vote. Zuck Bucks were buying votes. Isn't that illegal? But no one went after him. But that's illegal. And now the Zuck Bucks are going to Donald Trump, because Zuckerberg is saying, well, I see the light. No, he sees the dollar bills.
Yeah, they try to compare that to what Elon Musk was doing, and Elon Musk wasn't buying votes. He had an award or something like that he put out there for people.
Oh, it was like a lottery. You throw your name in the hat, and I forget what it was. He would give you so much money if you won the lottery. It was a lottery.
Mm-hmm. And they try to make it sound like he was buying votes.
No. And you also had to be residents of only specific states too, where lottery was legal.
Mm-hmm.
So he went by the book. He followed the laws. But what I find amazing now is Zuckerberg is finally admitting that up on Facebook and everything, we were censored. We had our site taken down, I think, twice. We've lost 2 YouTube channels because of censorship. And he now admitted that the Biden administration called them up, cursed them out, he was saying, and told them, pull those sites down. How dare they question the jab when COVID hit? How dare they question the safety of wearing masks? How dare they question us being secluded and kept inside and church services not being given? Oh, but I'm sorry, strip joints were still open?
Well, they didn't want to hear other expert opinions outside, of those that supported COVID. Anyone that didn't support COVID and they were expert, they were quieted too. They were silenced.
Yeah.
They were
Well,
censored.
if you see me popping in and out, every time I move my cursor to the right, it changes the camera frame. So it's going to be like, here she is. No, she's not. Here she is. No, she's
But
not.
you got two monitors.
Oh, well, I've got a second one where I'm watching all the social networks, the
I
postings
see.
being posted there.
I see.
But I can see in the green room where I've got the full screen, but as soon as I move my
Mm.
cursor, it changes the camera. I haven't figured out how to unchange that. But I find this is very interesting that people are turning around and they're starting to see the folly of all these strange social, I don't know, what do you want to call it? New social norms. And now states are turning around and saying, no, we're going to become more constitutional. Here in South Carolina, there are two bills, Parents' Bill of Rights. One dealing with the parent rights with their children in education, and the other one is a medical Bill of Rights for parents to have control over their children.
Mhm.
We've got 27 states where you've got governors and attorney generals that are conservative or red leaning. And we're seeing this to come around state by state. And I suggested this the other day. When we see the massive displacement of people in California, the massive destruction of property out there in California, and I'm saying this loud on air right now, what we should have done is these red state governors turn around, put together a package to invite those individuals that no longer have a home, that have no place to go, they've lost everything. If you want a state that's going to help you get back on your feet, come to us. We'll even provide you transportation. You tell us you want to come over here. We're going to put together a package to help get you back on the feet. And maybe down the line, if we help you with your mortgage, maybe there's some sort of repayment plan. We'll work something out. We'll help you with your legal problems in trying to recoup whatever you can for your lost property. We'll support any attorney general or whomever, whatever
Mhm.
law firm that wants to do a class action suit to help these people. We will give them our support. We will help you wherever we can. We'll provide you with a place to live. We'll make sure your kids are taken care of, your pets are taken care of. Come on over to us. And nothing's completely free, understand that, but we're going to help you get back on your feet, and we're going to help you stay on your feet. This is what these governors should be doing. Come to our state.
Yeah, you don't hear that, but if that should happen, I hope they would come and come with the thought of voting, a little differently than they did when, where they were living, because a lot of people are coming from the liberal cities down south, but they still vote in the same way. And we tell them, you're welcome here, but leave your politics up there.
Well, you can't change a person's mind, but you can
No,
change their mind. You can change their hearts by
you
your
can help.
actions. By
Hmm.
your actions, if you have a governor in a conservative state say, come on over, we're going to help you get back on your feet. We'll do what you need to do to help you get back on the feet. You want to rebuild your business? We'll help you rebuild your business. We'll make it easy for you to do it. You change their hearts, you will change their mind, and you will then change their vote. If you have someone in a liberal state and say, all right, we'll come over here and we'll give you food stamps, free housing, and whatever else. We'll give you everything we give an illegal alien. Well, sure. Let the liberals go to that state. But if you want to be a responsible individual and you want to have a piece of your own, once again, you come to our state. So let the liberals go to the liberal states. But you got a heart that says, no, I see you're trying to help me be a real American. not a ward of the state. Just do it that way. I think we can do it.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking when I first heard about all these fires breaking out and the absence of water in the hydrants, there were no full reservoirs, and they were short maybe 50% of the manpower they needed. I was thinking, well, God, if they're having this kind of problem with forest fires, how would they respond to a nuclear attack when you have to deal with radiation and everything else that goes along with a nuclear attack?
Oh, they'll turn around and say, well, the federal government's responsible for that. I'm sorry. I for those that know, I do a second podcast. It's called Moms Across America with Vicki Tompkins. She happens to be the GOP chair in El Paso County, Colorado. That was the county that the Democrats tried to get Trump off the ticket. And Vicki was one of the instrumental people in helping him stay on the ticket and getting the county to vote for Trump. We do this podcast. We record it on Wednesdays, and it goes up on Dan Perkins Media and several other outlets. And 2 Wednesdays ago, when days after the fire started to break out in California, and I said, what we need, seeing how unprepared the state is, especially the city of Los Angeles, once this is all said and done, I wouldn't be surprised to see if the citizens of California go forth and put in a recall petition. And sure enough, as of today, there is a recall petition for Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass. They have, I believe, 10 days to respond. And I think within 2 weeks, they should be able to start putting a ballot initiative together. So the voters in California can recall the mayor in the city of Los Angeles and recall the governor. Hey, they're waking up. The people in California are starting to wake up. We're waiting for our first guest to call in, and just bear with me because I know that they both said, there it goes. See, the second I touch the cursor, there goes the camera. No.
See, now you're here.
Crazy.
Now you're not.
Now you see me. Now you see me. Now you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, waiting for our first guest to call in, and I know I saw. Just bear with me because I know I have to go through my emails here.
He's not from California, is he?
One of them is.
Oh my God.
One of them is. Let me just see if I can pull this up. All right, we got James at 3, and right now neither one have signed in yet. And all right, just bear with me, folks, as I'm trying to see if I can get our guest to sign in. I'm just trying to remember who. Oh, here we go. All right, so I'm going to just text her and see if they will sign in. All right, so Curtis, go ahead. I'm going to pop out while I see if I can try to contact our guest, okay?
All right. As we know, Monday is the inauguration of Donald Trump for the second time. He's only the second president in United States history that's won twice non-consecutive terms. Cleveland was the first, Grover Cleveland. But we also know that though Monday is the inauguration day, it is also Martin Luther King's birthday. And I've had conversations with some of my liberal friends who think government, meaning Trump, is doing Martin Luther King a disservice because it's a holiday for him. I said, look, that's written into the Constitution pretty much when the president gets inaugurated,
Yeah. All right.
It's not just being disrespectful.
If there's any way they can turn around and say blame it on Trump, they're going to do that. That said, let's bring on our next guest, Mr. James Steele. He's with the CO2 Coalition, and my dear friend, Gregory Wrightstone, who keeps standing me up, and I'm going to have to chide him for that. So welcome aboard, Jim. How are you today?
Very
Hi,
good.
Jim.
Thank you. Where are you broadcasting from?
I am in South Carolina. My co-host is in Florida.
Florida.
And I have some southern roots down there, so I was just curious.
Well, even though I was born in the North, I got here as soon as I could.
My father was from Alabama, but he moved to the North. And then I moved to California. So but I've had a number of cousin reunions out there.
Well, you've had a book called Landscapes and Cycles, an environmentalist journey to climate skepticism. I almost did that without stuttering,
Yeah,
which
you did
came
well.
out
You did well.
which came out a little over a decade ago. But watching what's going on in California, there's a lot of other people that are having their come to Jesus moment when dealing with environmentalism compared to realism, aren't we?
Well, yeah, there's a mixed bag. I still consider myself an environmentalist, but I think the climate change crisis is causing a whole bad analysis of what's going on for the things that we could really do to help the environment. And so I've, over the years, I'm an ecologist, so I had to study everything that affects our ecosystems. And as I learned my climate science, you just realize all the claims were really bogus. It's what I call they often use what I call zonerisms. Have you ever heard that term?
No.
There was a kid called Nate Zoner who had a science project in 1997, and he titled it, "How Gullible Are We?" And he won the science contest, and he got 43 out of 50 ninth grade students to ban water. And he did it by, instead of calling it water, he called it dihydrogen monoxide. And so the kids were just thrown by that. And then he just said, this stuff is corroding all our metals and it could get worse. And if you have too much of it, you could suffocate from drowning. But he didn't call it drowning. And he says, and now we're finding it in our vegetables, our fruits, and mother's milk. So all the kids raise their hand. Yeah, I'll ban it. That's a horrible thing. But it's now used sometimes by people to say you can take a science factoid and misrepresent it and make people come to the wrong conclusions if they're not aware of the science themselves. And from what I've known running an environmental field station for 25 years, most of the people are woefully unaware of all the real dynamics, all the real science. And what we're suffering is this propaganda war that's really, it's got people running like Chicken Little. They don't really understand the science, and they're afraid we're all going to die. And I think our real crisis is that kind of misinformation.
Well, I said it's a multi-trillion-dollar business.
Yes,
and
indeed.
that's what it is. It's driven by the almighty dollar. And people sometimes just go, whatever the flavor of the month is or the moment is, and whatever is the advertising hypes the best, that's what they're going to go with. I'm trying to remember who had said it, is that in the end, socialism and communism will succeed because people would rather have someone else think for them. I'm paraphrasing it.
Well, yeah, but I understand that. People don't like it. I'll tell you, Einstein, they asked him, how come you're so smart? He said, I'm not that smart. I just keep asking questions. And most of the people just take whatever gets on the news and just go with it. And they're not critical thinkers. They don't go deeper. And I know for just asking questions, I've had people threaten me at home and saying, oh, you're going to cause us all to go extinct. And the amazing thing is, if you look at all the medical literature, deaths related to coldness are 10 times greater than any deaths related to warmness. Yet they're making a little bit of warming seem like it's going to kill everybody and it's going to call our ecosystems to collapse. And they're doing the same thing and saying, oh, CO2 has a warming effect. They don't mention the cooling effect that it also has. Their eyes glaze over when you ever mention that, even though that's in the science. And they just accept that, because CO2 warms, then warm makes things drier, and therefore that's causing all these fires. But as an ecologist, you have to think about all these other things. And if you don't consider all those, or you leave them out and you just cherry pick one thing, then you totally miss what's the real cause of this. And that kind of infuriates me, the way people they're weaponizing every weather event, every tragedy, and blame it on CO2. And it's really misleading.
But when I first met Gregory, when he first came out with his book, And he was brand new. He didn't have anything put together. I had him come down to my Tea Party meeting to explain why climate change is not the alarming thing that people think it is. Most of what we see is natural. We need CO2 to grow plants. We need the CO2 for the plants to turn around and turn it back into oxygen so we can survive. We need the CO2 so we can grow food so we don't starve people to death and have deserts out there. But we're looking at maybe just only CO2, but no, it's an ecosystem for a reason. Everything is intertwined. Is what you explain in some of your articles and on your websites that you have. And there are links to it in the show description. People can learn more about you by going to the description.
Oh, thank
but
you.
It is when we saw the Hawaiian fires, and what they did in Hawaii is they made the pineapple plantations go south. They disappeared, and they allowed an invasive species to come in, and they didn't do good land husbandry. This was perfect tinder for a fire. And no one goes, no, because of whatever little bug or cricket or mouse or whatever is floating around in there, we got to preserve the animals. And yet they failed to realize the danger they're putting the rest of the population to. And this is what you explained.
It's destroyed too. So that's the issue.
So we started off the show going, because we grew up with Smokey the Bear. Only you can stop a forest fire. Yeah, we can stop the forest fire if we do good forest husbandry. We used to have the forestry department, federal forestry, teeth and backwards, forestry department would go out and do controlled burns. But for some reason, they stopped doing that in the late 80s and 90s. It's no, we're not doing any more controlled burns.
Well, they'll still do some, but it depends what the smoke regulations are that shut them down, or they have to be careful. If the vegetation isn't dry enough, then you get too much smoke. But if it's too dry, it escapes. So they're in a quandary. But when the fuel moisture gets like below 8%, it burns really quickly and it's out of control. And you can, the issue is with this vegetation, when you refer to the Lahaina fire, when you have these weeds and these dead grasses, fire experts call them 1 hour fuels and 10-hour fuels, meaning that once it stops raining, within the day, these fuels are highly flammable. They're that susceptible to moisture change because they're small, like a piece of paper or whatever. So it doesn't take climate change to affect it. And you say, oh, well, it's been dry in California. Well, summer, it's always dry. Back out east, you guys don't understand how dry it is because you have all that moisture coming up from the Gulf. But we don't rain at all for the summer. We have a complete drought. And then added to that, we have El Niños and La Niñas. And when you have a La Niña like we have this year, it adds to the dryness. It blocks the moisture from coming from the ocean to the land. It's not because it's any warmer. It's because of the way that moisture is being blocked. The same thing with the deserts. And then when you add to the Santa Ana winds, they only happen in the winter, in the fall. It's when it's cold in the deserts. The Pacific Ocean is still a little bit warmer. It doesn't cool as fast. And that causes the winds to go from the deserts to the ocean. And then if the pressure systems line up just right, you accelerate that. And then you add to that going down these canyons to where a lot of people live. I don't know if as a kid you had played with a garden hose or a water fight. You put your thumb on the end and it makes the water shoot up much faster. Well, as it goes down those canyons, it speeds up. So it's not that unusual to have these. The Santa Ana winds are often 70 miles an hour or stronger. Up here in Northern California, we call them Diablo winds. It's the same dynamic. Once you have an ignition, those winds will just spread it. And you could have rain and snow 2 days before that. And all that 1 hour and 10-hour fuels, the dead grass, the shrubs, they're going to be highly flammable within just 2 days. And those Santa Ana winds, because they're coming from the desert, they are so dry that relative humidity drops to about 10%, which dries it out even further right away. So you don't need climate change. It doesn't matter how dry the summer was, and it's always dry because of our climate. And it doesn't matter if it hadn't rained in 4 days ago, 20 days ago. It's still going to be very ripe. And everybody in LA knew that they were in fire danger. And if you listen, there were some people, they had bought pumps. If you go flying to Los Angeles, almost everybody's backyard has a swimming pool. Well, one thing they could have done is everybody could have had a pump to help defend their own house. And then one guy even went further, he got scuba gear. He said, if the fire gets past my garden hose, I'm jumping in my swimming pool with my scuba gear, which is actually, but all your residents knew that was going to happen. And so there was a great failure of government to protect the community by creating vegetation breaks, fire breaks to prevent the fires. Well, once a fire reaches somebody's house, the house is really volatile. You have a lot of these plastics in it, or the wood is extremely dry. And once one house catches on fire, it radiates enough heat to catch the next house if they're that close together. Yep. And so I've seen fires where the firemen are not putting it on the house that's burning. They're putting it on the houses next door to keep those houses from being ignited. So all those things, the government should have made sure there were enough fire breaks, there were enough water, but they had one reservoir close. So almost to cover their ass, pardon my French, is they want to blame climate change as, oh, this is due to climate change. And it's you have a bad analysis, you're going to have a bad remedy. And so instead of doing what we need to do to really protect people, you blame climate change. And now I say, oh, they want all the oil companies to pay for the losses that they had in California, when really the blame would be for electric companies. Because when you get these high winds, you often get electrical lines go down, and just a little spark, if it's in grass or those 1 or 10 hour fuels, is all it takes. So now I like to tell people to understand temperature and the type of vegetation. If you have a lightning strike, hit a tree, most of the time the tree doesn't burn. It might blow up a little bit, explode as the water in there. But that lightning strike is 50,000 degrees temperature, Fahrenheit. That's 5 times more than the sun. But the third biggest fire we had about 4 years ago, called the Dixie Fire, just north of where I live now, it got started when a rancher was driving a metal stake into his field. It hit a rock, hit a spark, and there were so many dead grasses there, the grasses took off, and now you have the third biggest fire. And it didn't need climate change. It just needed these 1 hour fuels to let one kind of ignition. And so it's a matter of ignition, and 90% of the ignitions are from people, not natural. So they'll say, oh, we're having fires all year round. Usually fire season that's natural is like June through August, because that's lightning season. Everything after that is not due to climate change, but it's due to people setting fires by accident, or winds knocking down electrical lines, or arson, which has also been a problem. And we've seen that in a number of places.
Yeah, we have. And just curious, because the lumber industry was so regulated, they weren't able to go out and harvest a lot of this timber. It would have also prevented a lot of these fires if the forests were actually handled. Let them go in and get this timber. But no. And they're worrying about CO2 going into the air. How much CO2 just went into the air from all these fires?
And that's the least of my worries, is the CO2. Make the next generation of plants grow better.
Hey, Jim.
Yes.
Before you joined us, Annie and I, we were discussing causation, or better yet, the driving motivation towards these bad policies by the left that cause things like this fire out there, because of them not doing some of the things they need to do to prevent. And Annie, she was saying that one of the driving forces, of course, was corporations, because there's money into this environmental angle. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I was also taking a view that there's some in this environmental movement, to them, it's a religion. And I say that because in a religion, you have to convert people. And they're doing this by teaching our kids what they believe in about nature and all these things. We got to save every little minor bird or whatever, regardless of how it impacts humans. So what is your views on the religious part for some of these people that are, in this environmental movement?
Well, it's hard for me to figure the psychology of everybody, because hanging around, I was a director of an environmental field station. So people that came up wanted to be immersed in nature. And a lot of it is, when you walk through nature in some of these places, you just say, God, there's a power greater than me. And it doesn't matter what your religion is. You can call it a lot of stuff. So sometimes there's that kind of nature love, but it's a lot. If they've jettisoned their beliefs in Christianity or Buddhism or whatever, often there's a nature component of that religion. So there is that aspect for some people. What I think is you've had some scientists, all of a sudden they learned CO2 could be a factor. And they say, oh, look, in their minds, they just go, and we've all been scared with stuff. You let your mind run wild and you come up with all the worst imaginations possible. So I think some of those people just fooled themselves. Some of those people I had a professor come up to me and we were talking. I said, what made you believe this? And he said, well, I was afraid you asked me that. I'm just trusting what other people have said. So it reminds me of the Chicken Little story. You get one bad analysis of an acorn hitting you on the head, but you convince the whole barnyard to believe it, and they don't know it, but it's this transmission of knowledge that way when someone's fearful. And what a lot of people forget with that Chicken Little story was in the end, you had Foxy Loxy. He saw all these people were scared, these geese and chickens in the barnyard, and says, here, I'll make you safe. Come into my den. And they were never heard of again. That was he took advantage of their fear and ate them. Well, what I see a lot now is you see the United Nations, World Economic Forum, they all believe in global governance. And if you want to justify global governance, what most of us don't want state government or national, you want local control because you know what's the problem. You need a global crisis to justify global governance. So they've jumped in, and you see a lot of articles. They talk to all the leaders of the UN and the World Economic Forum. They didn't bring skeptical scientists into the debate with the alarmist scientists so people get a better sense of the science. They brought in Greta Thunberg, who knew squat about it.
Yes.
Press on people's emotions. Oh, we got to save the world, and I want to save the world, and I don't want to be guilty of causing everybody to go extinct. But it's such bogus fear mongering. It infuriates me in that way. So I've just, as I retired, I just felt like I got to get the word out. And unfortunately, as Mark Twain said, it's easier to fool people than it is to convince them that they've been fooled. So that's what we're up against. That's why I'm so grateful to give any kind of interview with your station or anybody else, trying to get a balanced approach, because they've been trying to shut down anybody. And this is the real science denial. Instead of having debates, they try to shut it down. And if you disagree, you're not disagreeing, but you're a denier. And they're claiming that they own the science.
Sound like COVID.
Well, there was many of the same kinds of control. If I just stop for a minute, CS, it says you're an author. What was the book you authored? I'd be curious to read it.
Which one?
Oh, that's right. I don't know. I'll have to look it up. So I was just...
Many.
You're on what, 28 or 29 now?
About 30 now.
Writing one book was tough enough for me. So it's hard to find the right audience too. So
well,
go ahead.
Dealing with what's going on in California, and I was telling the audience I do another show on Wednesday called Moms Across America with a different network, and 2 Wednesdays ago I said, with the breakout of these wildfires, I wouldn't blame it. I would urge, if anything, that Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass get recalled. And as of this morning, there is a recall petition that he has to answer within 10 days. So the people of California are realizing that it was man caused this disaster. Number one, for not doing proper husbandry. Number two, not doing proper safety. And number three, kneeling to the climate change god in complete disregard of what your constituents and the people need. We needed to have the reservoirs full. We needed those. Matter of fact, I did a show, it was more than a decade ago, with a gentleman that was a farmer out in California, that he ended up losing his farm because they closed off the water access to protect the Delta smelt. And I was really, really surprised listening to Gavin Newsom going, well, you can't blame this on the Delta smelt. Well, I know it was a smelt, but I don't think it was a Delta smelt they were trying to protect this time.
But that's part of it. We have you drive down Interstate 5 and you see the aqueduct bringing water from the San Joaquin Sacramento Delta and bringing it south. And they need a lot of that water. They've drawn out a lot of groundwater and the land is just sunk. So that's part of the issue. But they could have built some reservoirs to help protect them. So in some ways, you say the smelt isn't the direct issue there. You could have made sure you had better secure power grid. I mean, there's really a greater correlation with the way the power grid is spread out as population has grown and fires, because most of them are started by faulty lines that get blown down in the wind. Versus CO2, there's no correlation. The 1700s, 1800s, way more fires when it was colder and a lot less CO2. And then what they did, it really started back in the 20s or the 30s, the Smokey the Bear, where they said it's a 10 a.m. rule. If you see a fire, we want to put it out by 10 a.m. the next day. And that was the Forest Service rule. And so there was this fire suppression. And they did it because they thought they were protecting people. But what they didn't realize is that's allowing all the shrubs that act like the kindling that can now ignite a tree. Because you hold a match to a tree, it's not going to burn the tree. I say a lightning strike is not going to burn the tree on its own. You need those shrubs and stuff to build up. So they screwed up that way. And they said, well, let's do prescribed burns because that's the easiest way to get rid of it. And so they've tried that and they're still doing it. But then we had the air regulations, maybe 25 years ago. Well, if you burn too much smoke, you can't do it. So those kind of regulations have set the stage for it. And it's just snowballed for a whole lot of other reasons. If you live in Southern California, you know your destiny is a fire. It's just vegetation that's ready to burn in the drop of a hat.
And the worst part is that not only did they not do that, but they also used this diversity, equity, and inclusion programs to pare down their services. And as I was reading, there's like 100,000 fire trucks that were not repaired. They were not being able to be used. We were understaffed.
500, but still, there were a lot more. In some fairness, I would say that with those big of winds and that kind of dry vegetation, naturally dry, it would be hard for them to stop a fire. But what they could have been used is to set up a fire break to prevent it from getting into the dense neighborhood.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
You could, instead of not cutting back on the fire budget, you could use that fire budget to have people make fire breaks. You use a bulldozer or people with a pick and a shovel. If you make a long enough swath of dirt, it's not going to reach the houses that way. And then you could have helped people put on fireproof roofs, because not everybody down there, I don't know the statistics now, but in the 2017 fire that they had during Santa Ana winds in the winter when it was cold, 10% of the buildings that burnt didn't have fireproof roofs. But help, because once one house goes, again, that whole neighborhood can go.
Well, Jim, it has been a lot of fun having you here. We have to have you come back again. You're with us. You're with our friend Gregory Wrightstone at the CO2 Coalition. And again, there's a link to your blog page so that people can see the articles and everything that you've been writing and learn more about you and get the green dragon off our back.
Well, we're trying. With regards to the fire, I did one YouTube on fires and how we adapt. And that's, if they went to my YouTube page, sort of it was done about 3 years ago. It really goes into all the science of how these fires are working.
Well, thank you, Jim, and God bless you for the hard work you do.
Well, thank you for keeping it real with everybody.
Thank you. All right. Jim Steele, check him out at the CO2 Coalition. We got our next guest back with us. Love always having him on here. He's been a guest for a number of years now. John O'Connor, the man, the author of Postgate, and I forgot the rest of the title.
Postgate is good enough. Postgate's good enough. Okay, they'll find it at Postgate. That's really, I have the rest of it is really a subtitle, and my publisher always notes the subtitle with the title. I think it's just the title, Postgate. And what it's about, Annie, as you know, is just how the Washington Post deceived us all in Watergate and started this whole stuff of today's false reporting. And that's where it started, because the media realized that they could influence politics. And so every journalism student since then has been sold on the idea that they're masters of the universe and what they write is the command of all the voters.
You know, watching today on the news, watching some of these with the liberal media, and some of them are touting themselves, you know, and I even have a signed letter from so-and-so saying how great I am. You know, you even see Karine Jean-Pierre patting herself on the back as they're leaving the White House instead of recognizing what her boss did. She used to be touting her boss, but she's touting herself. They're so busy feeding their own ego that they forget there's the rest of humanity around them.
Well, yeah, and you never find any criticism anywhere. That's one of the real problems. And I think a writer in the Christian Science Monitor said it best just recently. This was an election decided by the media because the media, the liberal media, could not see its mistakes or the mistakes of the party that they were touting. And therefore, they're in a bubble. They're in a self-referential bubble, thinking that everything they're doing is just peachy when it's not. And most of these people called voters weren't particularly buying it. So with all the animosity that they had geared up toward Trump over the last 8 years, the fact that Trump still won shows you how powerful they really are.
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because something you wrote back, was it now 7 years ago? Almost to this date, December 3rd of 2018. You wrote an opinion piece about the ecological sustainability enabling California's ecological Armageddon. And as I reread your opinion piece, I'm going, all you had to do is just photocopy this, send it back in, and just regurgitate, because it's exactly what happened to California today.
That's right. And the reason I wrote it was hoping that someone in this wonderful California government of ours, or local governments, would look at this and say, look, we've got to do some brush clearing. We've got to do some tree thinning. And I got to say, some of this is local. You can't blame it all on Gavin Newsom. I live in an area, I live in the hills of Marin County, and the local folks there have been very, very diligent since those fires in 2018 of clearing our hills. We go up, we take out all the loose stuff. We do it in our own yards. We do it in sort of the free space the county owns. And, it's a very good thing to do, but the government should really be actively involved. And our local government happened to be in Marin County. Maybe we don't have anything else to do in this county. But in any case, it wasn't done. And it's a failure of progressive leadership. The more you get into what really happened, you realize that everything that failed came about as a result of progressive thinking. You had budget cuts because of DEI and so forth. Even the climate money that was budgeted, which was quite ample in California, went to go to low-income people who were affected by climate change. It's just a sort of a way to give money to the less fortunate. I don't mind some of that, but in the name of climate change, no, that's not climate change money. What are you doing to really ameliorate the so-called effects of climate change? Now, I'm a great fan of the CO2 Coalition. They're nailed. I've talked to Wright Stone. He's a wonderful guy. I've written articles about Richard Lindzen and Will Happer, who are the lead lights of CO2 Coalition. This has nothing to do with climate change. California was burning up long ago, and in more modern times, good fire suppression and fire prevention had cut down our burning. Now we're back to the good old days. We might as well not have any government at all. The only thing that's changed from 1800 is there are now 30 million people here. And we're not doing anything to thin the forest. We're not doing anything to do controlled burns. The Native Americans were much better with controlled burns than we are. So that's just a shame, Annie.
Well, that's exactly what I said in the beginning of the show, that we learned from the Native Americans about good husbandry of the forest and everything else. We learned about being as concerned citizens of the environment, but you don't have to be an environmental extremist and then just change that. It's a multi-trillion-dollar business, and it's the only reason why it exists, because it is a money machine. And unless people realize that, we're going to see more of these wildfires. We're going to see more destruction and loss of life. We don't know how many people have died because they haven't gone through all the structures that are gone. There's probably buried underneath the rubble, bodies that we have yet to identify. And we'll never know probably how many homeless encampments were destroyed because the forest, they're in the forest. They're in fields that just disappeared.
How many people were breathing in? Yeah, Annie, and how many people were breathing in bad air? And on some bad fires, like 9/11, how many people died after 9/11 because of the air they were inhaling with all the
still
poison?
dying.
Yeah. So we have still dying. You're absolutely right. And so this is a serious issue, serious health issue. But what's interesting about it is it was all caused by not all by environmentalists. You had the combination of environmentalists and DEI type of stuff. You put those together, the budgets are constrained, and people do not feel that they should get rid of a twig. There was I don't know if you know this, but in Pacific Palisades, there was a fire road that the government was trying to widen and clear out, and also get rid of wooden telephone poles and put in steel telephone poles specifically for fire purposes. However, it was discovered that in the course of this, whoever was doing this widening was destroying the milk vetch plant. And the milk vetch plant, had destroyed 180 of them, and that's bad. So we got to protect the milk vetch plant. So they stopped
What's
the work.
a milk vetch plant?
I've never heard of it until recently, and I didn't realize how important it was in my life. But apparently, that was halted, and that fire road is all grown over. There are a lot of places where there were fire roads, and now fire equipment cannot get in to fight. And of course, we had the reservoir down. We have people not employing. I'll tell you another thing. Like at one point, there were 25 fire trucks that were operational. There are many that aren't. And the powers that be only assigned 5 to Pacific Palisades, even after the fire broke out. Why? Well, they said, we need the other trucks in case something happens downtown. That sounded kind of phony. Well, what's going to happen downtown? Until the real issue surfaced, which was that was going to cut into overtime. And if you cut into overtime, guess what? The people wearing the brass on their uniforms may not have all that fat overtime at the end of the year when they're billing 22-hour days. And so a lot of that is just sheer greed that is causing this. So you can't make this up, but the budgets are not utilized in a way that keeps foremost in mind the safety of the California residents. And it's more about how much I'm going to get as a person here in a sinecure and so forth, and how are we going to negotiate our next union contract and so forth. So the whole thing is terrible.
It is. But as of this morning, I heard it on the news that there's a group that got together and has enough signatures that have filed a petition to recall Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass. Does that cheer you up?
Well, I'll tell you what, certainly Bass should be recalled. I am one of the lone voices that say that I kind of feel a little bit of sympathy for Newsom. The only thing I would say about Governor Newsom, where his priorities are off, is this stuff with climate change and his budgeting. It's in a way, it's hard for him to micromanage all these agencies that are just not doing their job, because it is their job. But now his broader needs and sensitivities are off. His priorities are off. We've got to cut out this climate change stuff. Besides the budgets I've talked about, there's other budgeting in there, like for EVs, that I'm not counting in the environmental and the climate change budget. And he's got 14.7 billion for EVs. We can't do that. That's not helping the environment. Not only that, but what's going to happen is we're going to have to spend more on infrastructure to support the charging stations that will be necessary if everybody has an EV.
Well,
And guess what?
I meant to ask Jim Steele this question, but I'm going to ask you, because California is really hot and heavy on these EVs. Now, how many of these fires were exacerbated by the fact that people had these EVs parked in the garages and on the road?
Well, we saw this when the Tesla burned in one of those recent terrorist things, that these things are not necessarily great for fire risk. But yeah, they blow up and the batteries blow up. There are potential fire risks wherever you go. The other thing about EVs is they don't really save on carbon dioxide. And the more you buy and mandate EVs, the lower grade of ores that you need to accept to get copper, to get nickel, to get all the rare earth minerals. So right now we tear up 500,000 pounds of earth for one EV battery, but that amount is going to be increasing as the ore quality decreases. And so what we're going to get is and then also we have to do all these substations that have copper. So what's going to happen is you're now talking about 1 million pounds of earth. A windmill in the ocean kills marine life. A windmill any place kills large birds. We're killing 300,000 of them a year, large ones, the beautiful ones, not the pests, but the large, beautiful ones that are the apex predators for the other birds. So it does tremendous environmental damage, all this stuff. The windmills are bad. The only place I've seen solar that you will get a good perch on it is there are some mining and logging operations that are remote that need a separate source of power. They've had luck doing a local solar grid. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, not all this alternative stuff is senseless, but now trying to do it on a broader scale or do industrial heating when you can do it with fossil fuels, it's silly. And I'm sure, as Mr. Steele talked to you about, Jim Steele, and fossil fuels are actually pretty darn efficient. You don't have to store them in a battery. You just put them in the tank and they're ready to go. Their energy is stored already.
Well, there's so much to talk to you about, and right now there's a wrongful death lawsuit against the utility companies, and actually I got into a tiff with my county council here because of some work they wanted to do, and I said, listen, we're in a hurricane zone, and when the hurricane comes through, we got a lot of power that goes down. Why don't you bury the cables? You're going to be doing the road work anyway, where you're going to have to rip them up and move them. So why don't you bury the cables, one and done? And here you have utility companies not maintaining the lines, or even just an accident could have caused that line to go down that started the first fire. Same in Hawaii, power line goes down, started that wildfire. So why don't we do something more to tighten, as you said, the energy grid and make it more secure?
That's what we should be doing. Instead, we're spending money on ridiculous projects. And remember this, as you point out, Annie, this whole idea of alternative energy depends on electricity. Electricity is supposed to be this wonderful thing, and it can be. But then if we're concentrating everything on electricity, we've got to do something to harden the danger that electricity causes. And so now, what happens and then the second thing about it is that electrical grid is now also vulnerable to foreign influence. I mean, it's very easy to send electromagnetic pulse bombs to disable an electrical grid. So should we get in a war with China in the future, I sure would like a lot of gas stations around and not charging stations, because they can get rid of those charging stations in an instant. And we're going to have our highways are going to be parking lots. When Texas had a big ice chill of some kind, and it took power down in Texas. Those EVs were just stranded on the highways.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you
Yeah.
do? So you can't. If think about a war, a sort of a Mad Max type of situation. If you're in a Mad Max situation, you can't depend on the power grid that nicely brings stuff to your charging station and so forth and so on. You need tanks of gas and so forth and so on.
John.
Yeah.
I came up through an era where we were taught to be one with nature. We were taught about conservation, being, in the wilderness without destroying it. And,
Yeah, I had earth shoes.
And everything was,
remember the earth shoes?
Yeah, everything was common sense based and measured. There was no extremism in what I was being taught. And a lot of what I learned about the environment and nature was when I was a Boy Scout. And I think we need more programs like that so people, our younger people can learn about, how to live with nature, but not, take it to, to the extreme where we put nature before man,
Well, that's right. That's right. I mean, we're supposed to be, and I think you can find some theology on this, man is supposed to be stewards of the earth. And we're not good stewards if we just let things grow around us and become our enemies. I mean, there is nothing wrong with cutting up a plant if it is necessary for the survival of all of us. In fact, it's necessary for the survival of other plants. The plants want it, we want it. But there are people out there that do not like cutting a tree. You can tell an environmentalist all you want. Look, if you don't thin this forest, if you're letting trees grow at 1,000 trees an acre rather than 450, which should be the limit, you're going to have intense forest fires. Well, what happens? I wrote this in my article, CS, about how the Bush administration tried to put in rules for its forests where you could actually cut trees and thin the forest. The Obama administration comes in and says, oh no, we don't want anything cut. You have to get just about a federal law to cut a twig. And that's going to destroy. There are a lot of environmentalists who say we don't want trees cut at any cost. And all that is just blinding yourself to the fact that you're harming the forest, number one, and you're harming all the animals that you claim you care about. In California, we were boiling trout streams. We were burning things up that reduced habitat for these animals. We're not being good to the animal life, where the vegetation is burning and humans are suffering. Our habitat, doesn't our habitat count? We're destroying animals' habitat, but we're also destroying our own. And it's just a shame to see it because we have such a beautiful state here. And we've already always looked at preserving the environment as people in Montana do. People in Montana are used to this. They understand that there are going to be forest fires. They're used to controlling them. They're used to doing controlled burns. We have cut that out in California, and it's to our detriment. And we've got this large population here, and it hurts everybody. And now what's happening is, by the way, this now has fiscal import. The state is going to be going bankrupt here soon. LA is now going bankrupt. San Francisco is bankrupt, but not because of this. They're bankrupt because we couldn't control our homeless and our crime. And so we're going under in the Northern California. So all of this is progressive policies. We're not being stewards of the land. And in California, we're not being helpful to our brother. If there's someone here that is hooked on drugs, that is dying in the street, I think I have an obligation to help him. Whereas a lot of these nonprofits will say, oh no, you can't intervene at all. That's an individual person. You can't help that person. Well, that's never been the case in our society. When something happens, when a person is debilitated, we should help him. We should help him rise up. We should take that person and help him. But we shouldn't let him just lie out on the street and do drugs. And I'll quote a local fire guy from LA who estimates that 50% of all fires in California have been caused by homeless people. Now, that's, again, not necessarily forest fires, but fires, period, are homeless people. And, you would expect that. They need to get warm. Often, many of them are often on drugs and so forth and so on, and are crazy. So we are not doing the job we should do as decent human beings. A lot of this is about, and I see, as you pointed out, we're not decent human beings if we're not taking stewardship of our environment and of our fellow man.
True.
Oh, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I just wanted to go off just to something else. Today, Joe Biden has declared a 28th Amendment ratified. The Equal Rights Amendment, which was written back in, I think it was written back in the early 70s. It had a sunset clause of 1982. And I remember people were trying to keep on revising it and bring it back to life. And before Phyllis Schlafly passed away, I had the pleasure of interviewing her, and we discussed the Equal Rights Amendment. And we had a little bit of a debate on why I felt it shouldn't be ratified. And it was not a good amendment because in the amendment, they talk about sex. Well, at the time that the amendment was written, sex was understood as gender at birth. And the amendment was not written speaking of gender at birth. And I said, if you do that, then you have a good amendment. But as it stands now, sex, and as the way our society is going at that time, I felt that it would be something fluid, which I proved to be correct. So now he's declared the 28th Amendment as ratified. We're the last state ratified it well after 1982, which I believe was West Virginia. So you don't have the ratification as prescribed by Congress, by law. And yet he decided that he can make a new amendment to the Constitution. I don't see a problem with that. Do you?
Well, there's no problem other than, the rule of law. Remember, he talks about the rule of law and democracy, and I think he's not following it. The problem is we have good law right now that outlaws true gender discrimination. For example, you don't have to have, and I'm not making this up because I litigated this back in the U.S. Attorney's Office. We do not need to have barracks in the Marines that have the same number of urinals for the women as for the men. I'm not making that up. But we have true safeguards against true gender discrimination, and all the ERA would do is sort of throw a monkey wrench into what's equality and what's not. As you point out, Annie, it's not really clear, what that would do. I mean, what is it that this amendment would do that's not already in the law? And the law, I think, is pretty robust against discrimination. So it's Biden grandstanding. Just about everything. If you want to know which side of an issue is wrong, you bet with Joe Biden. I'll quote two people, Annie. I'll quote, first of all, President Obama, who said, "Do not underestimate the capacity of Joe Biden to F things up." Okay, that's proven. Now I'll go to Robert Gates, the Secretary of, I think the Defense and CIA head and so forth and so on, National Security Advisor. He wrote in his book in 2015, in the past 40 years, there's been no national security or foreign policy question upon which Joe Biden has not been wrong. This is a terrible guy. Now in his last days here, he's trying to throw everything he can against the wall, some of it in mischievous fashion. Let's put it that way.
It is amazing what can come out of Joe Biden. He's talking about more amnesty pardons. It's unbelievable what he has done and what was going to have to be undone as soon as Donald Trump, swears himself in as president. And I'm glad that they moved everything indoors now because of security concerns and of the weather. I'm glad he did follow his security advice on that one. But what gives me hope is that this Congress has passed Title IX, saying you cannot have boys playing in girls' sports. It's based now on gender. So if it's girls' sports at gender at birth. And I'm glad to see that they realize the harm that it's been doing. You know, as someone who grew up and had a potential back in the 70s to use sports to get a scholarship into college or get into a career with sponsorships and an income, that has been stolen from a lot of women when they do the gender bender, which is what I call it. And
Right.
I'm glad that now women are getting that right back. It gives me hope.
That's right. That's right. Both my daughters were athletes. One of them went to college on it all the way through, and her dad was very happy about that financially. But more than that, it made her into a leader. She was captain of her team, her college team, and now she's a very successful human resources person leading teams. And a lot of that comes from Title IX, and it's a very, very good legislation if properly implemented. But boy, this other stuff, once again, the progressive ideas end up harming the people that they claim to be benefiting.
Well, there's so much more to talk with you about, and we're out of time, John, as always. I mean, the latest thing is now TikTok. So.
Well, I think Trump, by the way, he pulled a masterful move, because with the combination of that of the Supreme Court, with the Supreme Court denying TikTok's suit, now TikTok has to sell. Up until now, they didn't have to sell. They thought they might win that suit. And now that they've got the mandate that they have to sell, I think it'll be good for everybody. I don't want to see those small businesses go out of business if they can be saved and we can keep TikTok in American hands. I think it'd be great.
Well, John, thank you, and God bless you for the hard work you do, and you're always welcome on the show. You're our favorite, or one of the favorites.
Yeah, Annie, love you. CS, take care.
All right, John.
All right.
Take care.
All right, check
Come
him
back
out, John O'Connor at postgatebook.com. There's a link also on the website. We will be back next week. Same bat time, same bat station, Curtis. Until then, we say good night and God bless.
Be safe out there.
Okay, here.
I'm praying for this land I love, America, America, the home of the free. But there are people making plans to change America. They've no respect for her or what matters most to me. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Long for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe with God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. Do you hear our battle cry across America? We've got to rescue her. You know it's up to me and you to see the truth behind their eyes. Don't change America. God bless America and the red, white, and blue. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Long for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. have loved and lost, and we still believe in God we trust. In the freedom our forefathers granted us, we know it's not too late to save America. Save America. Let's save America. Together we can save